Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that your name be glorified as we continue to know, love, and serve you more, and as we continue through our journey through elements of the book of Numbers. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today we have an interesting reading, and it kind of reflects on something that we could ask the question about: why can God be so harsh in the Old Testament? You may or may not know there was a heresy that's focused on that, and the heresy was that actually the Old Testament God is different than the New Testament God, which we find in Jesus. And that heresy, created by a man by the name of Marcion, is called Marcionism. And it says there were two different gods, but we don't actually believe that. And one of the things that, as I was saying yesterday, that I like to bring up is the idea of, you can see in society, you can also see in the Old Testament and the New Testament a form of an evolution that happens. Now, some people, when they hear the word evolution, they get nervous, and because they don't believe in evolution that you see in science class. Catholics, we do, but that's not what I'm talking about. And that is a biological evolution. But there's clearly other forms of evolution. You can see that in our society. I mean, why is it that if we went back to, why is it that if you visited Plymouth Plantation down in Plymouth, Massachusetts, for those of you who are in the Boston area, you find a whole different technology than you do the minute you step off of Plymouth Plantation and are in the town of Plymouth? Well, the reason is because between that time and our present time, there's been this huge evolution that has happened in technology and knowledge and everything else. So evolution is real, but when we look, that form of evolution is real. But when we look at the idea of why is it that you have this very strong God, in a sense, well, obviously we're talking about God in the Old Testament, but not so much in the New. And the reason is because God is teaching the Hebrews to trust in him, but also to obey him, because they haven't yet learned the disaster that happens when they don't obey him. And it's not so much that he will punish them, it's that they're going to walk down the wrong path. So he has to send the very clear message: do not disobey, otherwise you're going to end up going down the wrong path. It's just the same thing when you're dealing with a child who may be about 2 or 3 years old and hasn't learned this is the traditional statement, but it always is, but hasn't learned not to put their hand on a hot stove. And so you have to be very strong and stern with that child so that the child will learn not to put their hand on a hot stove. But when they're 15 years old, you don't have to teach that, and you can be gentler with the child, even though you may have even more difficulties, but you're going to have a different way of talking. Why? Because of the growth that happens between you and the child as well over the years. So it's very similar that God is being very strong. So what we're seeing here is Aaron and Miriam are going to Moses and complaining that he has married a Cushite, and that is an African woman. And so Moses has married this African woman that is believed to be Zipporah. And what was it? I think it was Ethiopia, that was Sheba in biblical times. So, and they're saying, now Miriam, by the way, was Moses' sister, and of course Aaron was the priest. He was the Levite with Moses. So they were speaking in a way that was disrespectful to Moses, but God comes along and makes it clear to them in very powerful ways that Moses is his representative, therefore no one is to disrespect Moses. And what he does is he then makes Miriam's skin leprous in a sense. That word isn't used, but a sense you could call it. So her skin is turned totally white and flaky. And even Moses is greatly upset at this, that this would happen. But what is God doing? He's communicating something extremely powerful, that no one is to cross his representative, because if they do, there's a saying I like to use all the time, and it is, if they win, they lose. It's actually a tactic that I've used at times. I tell people, sometimes when you're in a battle, the best thing you can do to win that battle is to let your opponent win. And when you do that, then all of a sudden the opponent thinks that they have defeated you, only to discover that they ended up winning something that is actually causing them to lose. You have to obviously see that within the context. So this is something that's very powerful. Well, what God does is prevents that from happening by making it very clear. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts.
Don't forget to tell others where they can find our program. You can hear us on WEZE 590 AM and WEZEradio.com at midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday, Eastern Time. We then podcast the program on your favorite podcast platform and at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also hear us on our parish website, ST for StAnthonyAlston.org. That's StAnthonyAlston.org. And let others know where they can find us and spread the word and subscribe to our podcast.
We're back. So we're talking about this powerful message where Miriam is punished because she has acted in a way that is just basically rejecting Moses' authority. And God has to come out and say, look, when you are dealing with Moses, you're dealing with me. So if you are being disrespectful to Moses, you're being disrespectful to me. And so it's an important thing to comprehend that God is so stern at that time. And when God is stern, he sends that message. And Moses intervenes, because Moses obviously is very upset that his sister has been punished like that. And Moses, says, no, you can't do this. And the Lord basically tells Moses, put her out of the camp for 7 days, and when it is over, she'll be fine. And he's like, well, why can't you do it now? And he said that basically, if she spit in her father's eye, that would be the punishment, to be out of the camp for 7 days. Well, essentially, she's done that. So she will have that punishment. Now, why Aaron isn't punished, I don't know. But you see, that whole thing is to send that very clear message: do not disrespect Moses, because he is God's representative. Well, let's look at this in another way. Let's go back to that understanding that we want to respect the altar. We want to respect the church. One of the things that we've kind of lost over the years, I remember when I was in school, two places where you never spoke were the library and church. But that's kind of gone away, and it would be good to get that discipline back. Only because to show this very strong understanding that there are certain places where ultimate respect is needed. And you can say certain people, but you also have to realize that that works both ways. So you don't want to be in a position where someone needs to be respected only because they have a position, but they haven't earned that respect. So, for example, if someone were to if I were to be someone who was disrespectful to people, was nasty all the time, was everything else, and someone were to disrespect me in response, and I'm like, who do you think you are? You don't disrespect a priest. Hopefully the person would turn around and say, if you disrespect others, then you deserve to be disrespected. And that's the truth. So that understanding is important. If people who are in a position earn that respect, that's important. not just because of their position. And that's an important distinction as well. But I'm bringing all that up to understand this is an important message. And the important message is to realize that God is setting an understanding of discipline and respect, because if people disrespect God, they're lost. Going back to what I was saying before the break, when you deal with people who are demanding to get this to win, and you realize that if you let them win, then you actually get them to lose, let it happen. And then all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh, what just happened here? And that is a way to defeating people, to say, okay, fine, you want to win that battle? Go ahead and win the battle. And then all of a sudden, what we used to say in the Navy, win the battle and lose the war. And the Lord wants to prevent that from happening. What he really wants to do is to make sure people understand, which he does with Miriam, that there are certain lines you do not cross, and if you cross that line, then there is consequences, because the Lord is teaching them how to respect his authority and the one whom he appoints for the good of all. We'll talk more tomorrow. In the meantime, this is Father Robert J. Carr wishing you a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.